I want to start with the subject of death in our society. It's a subject that we shy away from very much. A lot of our culture, it's one of the rare atheistic cultures. That is, basically this culture teaches that there is nothing beyond death, that you don't have to be concerned with any higher beings than human, and that we are all bubbles and burst. This is what they say without any proof. This is what our young people are being taught in the universities. When you bring up the subject of death, you are often faced with a misquotation of the Buddha and told that the Buddha said, don't talk about it. It's not worth talking about. Concern yourself with life now on earth. And Confucius, of course, did say that. He did teach that. He refused to discuss any problems beyond the sphere of human beings reacting with human. Not even human with animal or human with plant. That wasn't considered. Human with human. That's it. And this is called often secular humanism. And it's still very strong today. Actually, the Buddha didn't say that at all. The four things that concerned the Buddha were suffering, disease, old age, and death. This is how the Buddha started to question what was wrong and what was beyond these things. So obviously, he didn't teach to ignore death, because death was one of the things that set him on his quest. And what happened was that he reformed Brahmanism. It was more or less a Protestant movement within Hinduism, which had been bogged down by a lot of ritual in his day, very much as the Roman Catholic Church at the time of Luther. And the Buddha taught a return to a purer interpretation. And often that was lost sight of later on. In the old Upanishads, we have the Katha Upanishad, where Nachiketas visits the house of death. And he comes as a guest, and death says, I will give you anything. I am bound as your host to make this offer, but don't ask me about myself. And Nachiketa says, no, I don't want wealth, I don't want fame, I don't want pleasure, I want to know about you. So obviously the Upanishads and Hinduism were extremely concerned with this problem. And he stays in the house of death till death explains about reincarnation and the solar and lunar path in which people are recycled, and the other path, the solar path, where they are carried beyond the necessity of further recycling. It's more or less like aluminum being recycled into various tin cans, and finally you get to the point where you say, I don't want to be a beer can anymore. And then you go on another path. So all this shying away from death in our culture is actually fear. People are really very afraid of it, because we have no cosmology, we have no teaching from an early age, the way most cultures did, explaining what happens. So we are given various watered-down versions of Eastern doctrines. And of course, people will say to me, as some very intelligent young man said to me the other night, I've been all through the Christian thing. Well, it isn't only Christianity. Immortality was the 13th article of the Jewish creed, put into the Jewish creed by Maimonides, the great Jewish sage. It was also in the Upanishads. The question has always been considered in every culture, and it's obviously the intelligent thing to do, because we can conceive geological time. It's very easily, hundreds of thousands of years. So our lifetime, biological lifetime, 72, 80 years, 90, 100, even 102, 125, doesn't matter. It's a drop in the bucket compared to what the time we can conceive, to what time spans we can conceive. So clearly there's something in us that is not bothered by time at all. And the whole purpose of religion in the deepest sense is to retie us to that thing. Religion means religare, to religament something, to retie it. So we have to become retied to that which we've lost. Obviously, we've lost it in our conscious minds because we don't have this assurance. People who have been through some experiences of a transcendental nature sometimes emerge without any fear of death at all. In fact, if they get high enough, they have no longer any fear of death. And the whole concept of death as annihilation, you have two choices, is the fallacy. It's either transformation or annihilation. There's no two ways about it, because something happens. So to say, well, you become a flower. Well, you don't become a flower. The molecules in your body may build up the body of a flower, but you don't become a flower. Egyptian, it just happens that that culture preserved some of these scientific facts better and clearer than any other culture except Taoist China, who also speaks of a higher embryonic process in the human being. In fact, Jung wrote the introduction to a book called, it's a Chinese book, translated into German and then into English by Richard Wilhelm, who did the first translation of the I Ching that was available, and it's called The Secret of the Golden Flower. But he didn't go into it enough. The golden flower was actually the golden embryo. It's the same word as in Sanskrit, Hiranyagarbha. Hiranya is gold, and Garbha is womb, or egg, or embryo. And so it was the golden embryo. Anyway, the pharaohs used to have these three couches, and we know what they were from Tutankhamun's tomb. And there was a hippopotamus couch with open jaws, teeth. And the hippo goddess, she was the great form of, the terrible form of Kali. And she was the one who chewed up bodies after death and destroyed things, Time the Destroyer. Because Kali is linked with the word time in Sanskrit. So everybody was chewed up and recycled. And that was the hippo couch. If you lay on that, that was the cycle you were on. You were going to get recycled. And then the sacred cow, a much more beautiful couch, a cow studded with stars, with a black skin and white spots all over, like the stars on the sky of night. And this was the dream realm, where you have beautiful dreams. The Tibetans called it the good side of the bardo. We would call it the, I suppose, we don't have really, in our culture, a Christian version, because purgatory is kind of icky. But it was a good side of the bardo, where you could have beautiful dreams, Indra's paradise. And then you get recycled again. And it was the dreaming and vision time, which you could gain great insights in. And the third was the lion couch. And that was the couch of transformation. That was the power that unlocked the hidden sun. The lion was a solar animal. And the sun, by the way, in classical astrology is exalted in Aries, the first sign of the zodiac. So it's always there first. It's the essence of it is to be the pioneer at the cutting edge. So the lion couch was this growth possibility. Now there are three types of pharmacopoeias too, three types of molecules that can do anything in neuropharmacology and ordinary pharmacology. There's the hippo drugs, as I call them, the ordinary drugs like aspirin and merthiolate that cure you of your ordinary bodily ills. And then there's the sacred cow, ones which have an indole ring in them, and they're mostly the psychedelics of the visionary kind, like psilocybin, LSD, peyote. Though peyote has mescaline, and that is very interesting because it has a molecular structure right in between the sacred cow drugs and the lion drugs. Then there's the lion drugs, which are very, very little known. There's one khat chewed in North Yemen, and it's also in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. It's discussed in the Lion Path, where we see hieroglyphs of a mortar and pestle and the laboratory of Osiris, where these things are compounded by priests. So they used khat leaves, but they must have used something else, so they wouldn't have needed a mortar and pestle. I'm beginning to suspect what they might have used, but I'm not sure yet botanically. Anyway, there were these three classes of paths, and they were related to three types of molecules. And the lion type of molecule, whether you got it from a plant or however, it jogs the brain, it stimulates these particular centers, which then open, because they're kind of rusty, and then the time elements come through. But the essence is the time forces. So if you can unlock it by any other means, meditation or anything else, you're welcome to do so. And there's no law about that as to what you must do or what you can't do, except that recently they have outlawed certain molecules that in our culture. But the Indians, of course, still use these molecules. Various cultures use them. It's a culture thing. And you can do what you want about that. But the time path is the most important thing.